Imagine a Florida where you no longer have to worry about annual property tax bills draining your savings. Sounds too good to be true? Well, that could soon become reality. Governor Ron DeSantis and other state leaders are exploring a radical idea: eliminating property taxes entirely. Property taxes are one of the largest financial burdens for homeowners. In Florida, they generate over $43 billion annually, funding essential services like schools, police, and fire departments. But with rising home values and tax bills increasing year after year, many Floridians are struggling to keep up. This proposal could transform homeownership in the state, making it more affordable and potentially attracting more residents. But here's the catch: without property taxes, how will Florida replace billions in lost revenue? In this video, we'll break down how this plan would work, who benefits, and what it means for Florida's future. Stay tuned. Governor Ron DeSantis has never been shy about pushing bold policies, but eliminating property taxes could be his most ambitious move yet. The idea has been gaining traction among conservative lawmakers and homeowners frustrated with rising tax bills. At its core, the proposal aims to eliminate property taxes entirely and replace them with alternative revenue sources. While the details are still being debated, the governor argues that cutting property taxes could boost home ownership, attract businesses, and put more money back into residents' pockets. One of the biggest motivations behind this proposal is Florida's commitment to being a low-tax state. Unlike most states, Florida already has no state income tax, which has made it a hot spot for high net worth individuals and businesses looking for tax relief. Eliminating property taxes would take this even further, making Florida one of the most tax-friendly places in the country. However, critics warn that removing property taxes could create a massive funding gap for local governments, which rely heavily on this revenue for schools, public safety, and infrastructure. The big question is, what would replace property taxes? That's exactly what we'll explore next. Eliminating property taxes sounds like a dream for homeowners, but for local governments, it's a potential budget nightmare. Florida's counties and cities collect over $43 billion per year from property taxes, money that funds public schools, police departments, fire services, infrastructure, and other essential services. If property taxes disappear, how will these services survive? Schools in particular would face the biggest challenge. Currently, about 50% of property tax revenue in Florida is directed toward education funding. Without this revenue, schools could experience budget cuts, teacher layoffs, and larger class sizes unless an alternative funding source is introduced. Local officials are also concerned about the stability of revenue. Property taxes are a predictable and steady income source because they don't fluctuate drastically like sales taxes do. If Florida replaces property taxes with an increased sales tax, cities and counties could face major funding shortages during economic downturns when consumer spending declines. Police and fire departments, road maintenance, and public health programs also rely on property taxes. If cities struggle to replace this funding, residents could see higher fees for services, more toll roads, or even privatized public services. Governor DeSantis insists that alternative revenue sources will fill the gap. But are they enough? Let's break down the realistic alternatives to property taxes and what they could mean for Floridians. If Florida eliminates property taxes, the state must find a way to replace $43 billion in lost revenue. The big question is, where will that money come from? One of the most discussed alternatives is raising the state's sales tax. Florida currently has a 6% state sales tax, but local governments can add up to 2.5% more, making the total rate as high as 8.5% in some areas. Some lawmakers propose increasing the state sales tax to 10% or more to compensate for lost property tax revenue. While this sounds simple, it comes with a major downside. Sales taxes disproportionately impact lower-income households. Since everyone pays the same percentage regardless of income, lower-income families would spend a larger share of their earnings on taxes compared to wealthier residents. Another proposed solution is a higher tourism tax, which would charge more for hotel stays, rental properties, and theme park tickets. Florida's booming tourism industry could generate billions, but experts warn this revenue source is highly volatile. If tourism declines, so does the funding. Other potential solutions include new excise taxes on luxury goods, digital services, or even a consumption-based tax system that shifts the tax burden away from property owners. The key question is whether these alternatives can provide a stable, long-term revenue stream to replace property taxes without overburdening residents. But what do the people think? Let's look at public and expert opinions on this controversial plan. The idea of eliminating property taxes has sparked a heated debate across Florida. Some residents and business owners are celebrating the proposal, while others worry about its potential downsides. Supporters argue that eliminating property taxes would be a game changer for homeowners. Many retirees and middle-class families struggle to keep up with rising property taxes even after paying off their mortgages. For them, this plan could mean significant financial relief and make Florida even more attractive to new residents. Real estate investors and landlords also see this as a potential win, as lower costs could encourage more property investment. Economic conservatives believe shifting to a consumption-based tax system would be fairer because it rewards savings and investments instead of penalizing property ownership. They argue that Florida could become the most tax-friendly state in the country, attracting even more businesses and wealthy individuals. But critics warn that eliminating property taxes could widen the wealth gap. A higher sales tax would disproportionately affect lower and middle-income families who spend a greater portion of their income on necessities. Meanwhile, wealthier residents who own expensive properties would benefit the most, as they would no longer have to pay large property tax bills. Public service workers, including teachers, firefighters, and law enforcement, fear budget cuts and potential job losses if replacement tax revenue isn't sufficient. So, is this plan even legally possible? Let's dive into the constitutional and legislative hurdles Florida would have to overcome. Eliminating property taxes isn't as simple as signing a bill into law. Florida's Constitution currently mandates property taxes as a primary funding source for local governments, meaning a major legal overhaul would be required. To remove property taxes, Florida would need a constitutional amendment which requires approval from at least 60% of voters in a statewide referendum. Given how divisive this issue is, securing that level of public support could be a major challenge. Even if voters approve the amendment, lawmakers must create a new tax framework that can reliably replace the lost revenue. This means passing new tax laws in the state legislature, a process that could take years. Additionally, Florida's Save Our Homes law, which caps annual property tax on increases for primary residences, would become irrelevant. This could spark legal battles over property rights and tax fairness, as some homeowners may argue they structured their finances around property tax stability. Local governments and school districts would also need a legislative guarantee for funding, potentially requiring complex negotiations between state and local officials. In short, while the idea is theoretically possible, the legal and political roadblocks make this a long and uncertain process. Now let's look at how similar tax reform efforts have played out in other states and what Florida can learn from them. Florida isn't the first state to explore property tax elimination, but history suggests it's a difficult goal to achieve. Let's look at what happened in other states that attempted similar tax reforms. In 2012, North Dakota voters overwhelmingly rejected a proposal to abolish property taxes. The main concern? Uncertainty about replacement funding. Even though the state had a budget surplus from oil revenue, residents worried that without property taxes, local services would suffer. Texas has no state income tax, much like Florida, but still has high property taxes to fund local governments. In 2023, lawmakers proposed reducing property taxes through an increased sales tax. However, strong public opposition, especially from lower income families, forced legislators to scale back the plan. Wyoming and Tennessee, these states rely heavily on energy production and tourism instead of property taxes. However, their economies are vulnerable to industry downturns. If Florida moves toward a tourism-dependent tax model, it could face similar risks. The key takeaway? Every state that has tried to eliminate property taxes has faced major financial and political hurdles. Without a stable, long-term funding plan, most attempts have failed. So what does this all mean for Floridians? Let's summarize the biggest takeaways. Florida's plan to eliminate property taxes is bold, but it comes with serious challenges. While homeowners and businesses could benefit from lower costs, local governments risk losing billions in funding for essential services like schools, police, and infrastructure. Replacing property taxes with a higher sales tax or tourism-based revenue might work, but it could hurt lower-income families the most. Plus, history shows that similar efforts in other states have failed due to public resistance and financial risks. So, will Florida find a way to make this work? That remains to be seen. Before we wrap up, here's how you can join the discussion. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Florida should eliminate property taxes, or is it too risky? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on the latest housing and tax trends, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. But here's the real twist. There's one hidden factor that could completely derail Florida's plan to eliminate property taxes. And if it happens, this entire proposal might collapse before it even starts.